This podcast is made possible by iZotope, experts in intelligent audio technology. Their award-winning software and hardware helps musicians and producers focus on their craft and not the tech behind it. iZotope, the shortest path from sound to emotion. Learn more at iZotope.com.
Hey, it's Larry Crane. Welcome to the Tape Op Podcast. Sylvia Massy made a name for herself as a producer and engineer, making records with artists like Tool, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Skunk Anansie, Love and Rockets, R.E.M, Johnny Cash, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, System of a Down, Smashing Pumpkins, Prince, and my favorite, Big Elf. She recently published Recording Unhinged, a collection of left-of-center recording techniques and ideas accompanied by her artwork. Sylvia recently moved her studio operation from Weed, California to Ashland, Oregon, which is where she took some time out from her busy schedule to chat with online publisher Geoff Stanfield. Enjoy.
This audio recording was not originally tracked with the intent of using for a podcast. It was recorded solely for transcription for our print interview. Please forgive any balance issues, background sounds, or lack of clarity. Enjoy. I was curious, when's the time for using your core recording techniques, and when's the time for something oddball, or what's pushed you to look beyond the typical recording norms?
Well, when I first go into a project, I sit down and carefully budget the time that I'm going to need to get the work done, depending on the instrumentation of the music I'm recording and producing. And I'll always try to schedule some extra time at that would usually be at the end of the session, where we can do some experimentation, because I want to get the foundation tracks done first before we go off into left field and start plugging in filters and going to some different location recordings to experiment. In that way, I can be sure that even if our experiments don't work, that we have the foundation tracks already recorded and that we're fine, and everyone can just relax, and have fun.
And do you feel that even when this stuff doesn't work, when you're going for something that's experimental, I imagine that brings a levity to the sessions as well?
Well, if everyone knows ahead of time that there is time at the end of the project that we'll be doing some experimenting, I think it adds to the excitement of the recording and makes everyone focused to get their parts done and not to linger on the little stuff, because we all want to have time to have fun, and it makes the whole process more spontaneous and lighthearted. A lot of times it will add, like you say, a levity to the sessions, because we're all looking forward to having a party at the end, basically.
And what sort of drove you to do that? I mean, was that something where, what was the first spark to get you to do something that was a little bit left of center?
Well, I've always been one to kind of try things that haven't been tried before, or to buck the trend as far as traditional recording goes. But the first time that I actually really scheduled this type of thing into a session was on the Tool Undertow session, when at the end of recording, we spent time setting up two upright pianos in a garage, and took a shotgun and shot them, and took sledgehammers and destroyed them, all the while recording them, and then taking those sounds and sequencing them into a piece. At the end of Undertow, you'll hear it. It's called Disgustipated. And it was a lot of fun, but we did wait until all the foundation tracks were finished, and we basically had the album finished before we went for this thing. And it could have worked, and it could have not have worked, but luckily I think it's a big part of that record, and it helped to create a mood for Undertow that is pretty special.
So you've been pegged as a heavy music producer, but you've worked with, Seal and Paula Abdul and Prince and Johnny Cash and Tom Petty and Babyface. I mean, just to name a few. How do you think you ended up being such doing so much heavy music? And is your approach to that production and engineering different for different genres?
Absolutely. I will approach different genres different ways, and there's things that are important with heavy music that are not so important with other genres. The music that I worked on while I was at Larrabee Sound was music in all genres, and not necessarily the genres that I would have gravitated towards. But I was really lucky to get to work with Prince and with Seal and with some of the R&B greats, Babyface. But when the opportunity came for me to work on hard music with Tool in particular, I jumped at the chance because that's where my roots are. I grew up with rock music like Led Zeppelin and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to work on that music that I had a passion for. Even though I love the work that I was able to do with Prince, that is also very exciting when I listen to it today, especially the music that is unreleased, and there's so much of it that he really wrote a lot of great music that is yet to be heard. So, but the hard music, I will always have that in my heart. But I do love, there's great music in all genres. So I do love country music. I love Zydeco music. I love reggae music. And I'll go for whatever comes in front of me. If it inspires me, I'm there.
What are some of the examples in the difference in approach?
Well, for a lot of pop music, I think vocals are the most important thing, and getting the right vocal performance, and also the foundation of the right beat and bass lines. Less important are going to be guitars. I like the idea of sequenced music as being textural, and to really bring out the textures in like industrial music, and then less emphasis on vocals. Some of the harder music, the vocals are buried, and they seem to be less important than the riff and the energy, overall energy in the music. So even though all instruments are important, there will be a focus on a certain thing, on certain types of music.
You talked about that time at Larrabee, but previously you were living in San Francisco, and at that point in your career, that seemed like a real pivotal move. What prompted you to move to L.A.? Was it a career choice or otherwise?
Well, I got passed up on a job because I was in San Francisco. I thought that I was going to get this gig with the Sea Hags. I'd co-produced an album with Kirk Hammett, the guitar player for Metallica, and the band, the Sea Hags, got a deal in L.A. with Chrysalis Records, and I thought, this is my big chance. But they went to L.A. and worked with Mike Klink, who was the top producer at the time. He had just finished Guns N' Roses. So when I got passed up for that job, I realized that I couldn't continue working in San Francisco and expect to get those gigs, get the big gigs. If I wanted the gigs, I had to go to Los Angeles. So that was the decision I made, and I moved there, but was unable to get a studio job right away. So I was working at Tower Records on Sunset for a while, and that's where I met a lot of the musicians that I connected with and had success with production later.
Starting over a little bit then.
Well, there was a band, the singer and several members of the group Green Jello, it was called. they were working at Tower Records, and we connected with music, and I love their comedy rock. They do metal versions of nursery rhymes, basically. And but they got in trouble for using the name Jello, so they changed their name to Green Jelly. And we had a pretty big hit with them called Three Little Pigs. And that was on the radio for a while. It hit, I think, number 24 on the top 100 singles on Billboard, which was crazy at the time. And that led me to work with Tool, because one of the drummers from Green Jelly was Danny Carey from Tool. And Maynard James Keenan would also be singing on some of the Green Jelly records. In fact, the song Three Little Pigs has Maynard James Keenan singing the part where that you'll hear it. It goes, "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." So it's the story of Three Little Pigs. You get it?
Yeah. So you've had your own studio, obviously the place in Weed, and now you've got this place in Ashland. How is it for you to go to work in a different room in Europe? Do you find it limiting? Does it just push you to be creative in new ways? We all have our go-to pieces of gear and our sort of comfort in terms of knowing what we can get things done quickly in our own places. So I was curious how that translates for you.
I do have a studio in Ashland, Oregon, that I really have set up specifically for the way I like to record. And it's a little unusual and difficult for other people to record in, perhaps, because it's open room recording. And I do my basic tracking with headphones in the same room that the musicians are playing in. And I've got a beautiful Neve 8038 console that I use for tracking. So when I go to other studios, generally they're set up in a more traditional way with a control room and a tracking room. And I can bounce between. There's no problem. I'll make sure that I bring reference music so I can understand what's going on with the monitoring in another room, because I'm so very used to the monitors that I use in my studio, which are oddball NHT M100 monitors that I've used for years. More recently, I use the Genelec 8351As and for mixing, and I love those too. But when you go into a new room, you may not get the monitoring that you're familiar with. So the use of reference music mixes that I've done, that I can tell on other systems where the changes would need to be made to make a great sounding mix. And so that's basically how I do it with music that I have produced, and then I'll use other reference music of popular music that I'm really familiar with to check the monitors.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about your relationship to gear and the role that it plays for you, because it's clearly an important part. You're a collector of odd consoles, and you have your Neve, and et cetera. So it's an important part of your story, but it certainly doesn't define you.
Well, I have to say that I'm really lucky to have this Neve 8038 console, and I bought it back when it was not necessarily a very popular console. So the importance of that in creating my sound, I suppose, is immeasurable. It's so important, but I don't necessarily need it. But I will always try to get something close to what the Neve does when I'm recording. The mic pre's are very important, I think. Also, microphones are important, but less so. I can do a great recording with inexpensive mics, as long as there are good quality mic pre's. And I think it's the reason for getting a better quality mic pre or EQ is just to give you an edge. So it's one less thing to have to worry about as you're trying to get a great performance, because ultimately it's all about performance. And even more importantly than that, it's all about the song. You can record a great song with any equipment, as long as the emotion of that song comes through, then you've won. So I think it's I think gear, I love gear. I love gear, and I continue to look for new and interesting types of EQs and compressors and microphones that I'm not familiar with. And so right now I'm really interested in Russian microphones and more of the East German style of microphone and rack gear that is harder to get in the Western world.
I imagine it gives you a new perspective and keeps things interesting for you, keeps it fresh.
Absolutely, and there's so much good new product coming out too. There's a company called Loop Trotter that I'm excited to start working on one of their consoles in early next year. I think they are making some products that are really good. I've been using their Monster stereo compressor for a while. I'm excited about them. I'm also excited about a lot of plugins these days. The Slate plugins are brilliant. I also use UA. I use Isotope especially for pre-mastering, which are just really well thought out, intelligent plugins. So there's a lot of runway out there to land a plane. There's so much more equipment, new and vintage, that I have yet to experience. The world is my oyster.
Well, let's talk about your book, Recording Unhinged, which is a fantastic and entertaining book full of knowledge, and it's also very visually compelling to look at with all of your illustrations. So why did you decide to write this book?
Well, the book Recording Unhinged came out of the many stories that people had shared with me about their own recording experiences, the unconventional recording that they'd done on very recognizable records like the Bruce Springsteen records or the Ramones records, or you can go on and on with that. People like Hans Zimmer and Bob Ezrin and Bob Clearmountain shared stories with me about these different adventures that they had recording and creating different sounds that were not done with digital boxes. So I collected these stories, and then I added my own stories to it of different things in the studios, different ways to manipulate sound and different ways to manipulate artists to get a certain performance. There's all kinds of techniques that are not written about in traditional recording books. So this was that book. The book is full of photos, stories, and then I did illustrations also to demonstrate how to connect equipment together to get a certain effect, or just diagrams of specific recording scenarios that would possibly interest people who are doing guitar recording or vocal recording, so that you can try things for yourself. It's really meant to inspire an engineer or a producer to try new things, and I think it does it really well. My partner and I, Chris Johnson, spent a year on the book, and it's really from the love of recording that it came to fruition.
Regarding the illustrations and the artwork, I mean, has that always been a passion for you, or is that something that was a studio distraction that developed?
I started actually as an artist before I was doing any music at all, and I went to the university with the intention of being an art major, but gravitated towards music when I started doing some commercial artwork for the college radio station. So the music really touched me, and I learned how to use the equipment in the college radio station, which led me to be able to manipulate sound for my own band. and doing some recordings there. And that led to me doing productions for other people. So it was kind of an organic way of starting. Yeah, it was. Let's see. Oh, so where were we with the art? But the artwork came back when I realized that I could describe different recording techniques using pen and paper. So I started doing that. I did also keep up with drawing caricatures throughout the time that I've been producing. So I have a collection of fun caricatures, but I didn't really start getting back into art heavily until just the last couple of years. And now when I am doing productions, I'll set up an easel in the control room, and while my engineer is doing a lot of the technical work, I'll be in the back of the room painting a new canvas. And it's really exciting because I can channel the music onto the painting, and each painting, each session painting, is vastly different from the last.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, in terms of and also listening and transferring the recorded medium into a visual. And I know a lot of people mix in a very visual way, in color and presenting tones with color. Do you think it affects your ability to listen more passively, when you're doodling or doing a painting, and let you connect to the music in a different way rather than zeroing in with a microscope on details of a mix or production?
Well, the funny thing is, it actually works in the opposite way, where if I'm painting while producing, I still am paying attention to all those details with the music. And the painting part of it just happens, and I'm not really concentrating as much on what's going on the canvas. So it changes quite a bit through a session, where it will start with one thing and then change into something completely different by the end of the session. The other thing is I believe that music and art are closely related, and I do think of mixes in regards to different colors in a palette. And I believe that when I mix very colorfully. I produce very colorfully, and those colors should be vivid. And so that's the approach that I take when I'm producing and mixing.
You have a lot of contributors in this book from all disciplines and genres of music. And production and engineering can often be a sort of a lonely job, and especially, if you're just mixing. And the last couple studios that you have been in reasonably isolated locations. I was curious, how often are you communicating with your peers, and, what sort of community you have there?
Well, here in Southern Oregon, there are local musicians that I'm in contact with, because I use their services for session work or for programming. There's a couple great programmers locally, too. But most of my clientele comes from out of town. And I also am as involved as I can be in the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, that's NARAS, whether it's by keeping up with them during Grammy Week. I'll reconnect. I'll go to the advisory board meetings. Recently there was AES in New York, and that's a great place to reconnect with the people in the industry. NAM is the big event in January that I make a point to go to and visit all days of the NAM convention, so that I can reconnect with people. We're very active, a very active community on Facebook and other social media also. So I actually wind up really staying very connected with my community, the recording community, and have expanded it because I'm spending a lot more time in Europe these days, and there's a whole other group of people over there. So it's not a very big community, actually, so it's easy to to meet people and to stay friends for a long time. I mean, forever.
Speaking of social media, you're very active, like you said, on Facebook and social media.
Well, for several years now, I've been making these little videos that I like to post on Facebook that seem to be doing very well. There was one in particular where I was working with a band called Thunder Pussy, and we set up inside an abandoned nuclear power plant in one of the cooling towers, and we recorded some music there, some of their songs there, and I did some videos, and those they got a lot of attention. So I like the media, the medium of selfie videos, and but I'm going to be moving more into a streaming format, and I have plans for a twitch.tv channel, and trying to do some work on that every day, trying to kind of have a little TV show where when I'm in the studio that I'll have multiple cameras through an OBS system that I can switch between. And I've done some preliminary shows, and they've turned out great. So you'll probably be seeing a lot more of the twitch.tv social media format. And it's very exciting because this, for me now, is a streaming service that will allow musicians to basically busk online and get paid for it. And people from around the world can watch your channel with whatever you're doing and can pay you directly for, give you a tip or whatever. It's really an exciting new format. So I think if you're not familiar with twitch.tv, that the time is now.
They paid you to say that, I'm sure.
Yeah, not yet.
How do you decide what projects you want to take on, and what do you think artists are looking for when they hire you?
Well, I have an aggressive approach to hard music in particular, but I think in general you'll find that I'm creative with the approach that I take to recording and mixing, and that I'll inspire an artist to spread their wings and to try things that they may not necessarily have thought of on their own. Or if that artist is truly creative on their own, then I'm the right person to collaborate with, because we'll use every tool in my toolbox to make their vision real. And so I love challenges, and sometimes this is a problem because I'll take on a project that really is a mountain to climb, whether they are, maybe mentally on the edge, which I kind of like, because there's this very special honesty about the music that will captivate me. There's other music that is more done for the passion and the love of the music, and less about commercial aspirations. And that's music that I really like to work on, is that it's truly art, and it doesn't matter if it follows any other trend, that it would be a legacy that is built for the artist. And I love those projects too. I also love recording in exotic places. If someone gives me an opportunity to go to Dubai to do a project, I will jump on the plane and go. This year I'll be going to Dubai and to China, and back to Europe for a couple different projects. So yeah, just bring it on. I'm ready.
You touched on something sort of interesting. It made me think of how the role of a producer can change, and what the role is project to project. I mean, some are going to need you to really roll up your sleeves and work on arrangements and et cetera. And then obviously you're going to work with people that assume more of a production role and have very clear ideas and a clear path. So how do you adjust? Keep that yourself happy in the process in terms of your contributions, and let the artist feel heard and as a valid contributor.
I always have to remember that it's their project, it's not my project, so I can't be precious about my ideas, whether they're accepted or not. So I welcome both the very particular artist who has a specific vision, and in that way I take more of an engineering role, or just an organization role, maybe, or the project that really needs complete rewrites on songs, or I need to just kick their asses and say, look, you need to write all new material. We're not ready for this yet. Either way, I feel blessed to work in this industry every day, that I get to sit in a room with musicians playing music. It's just, I can't complain, and there's nothing to complain about here at all.
Can you talk a little bit about being the experience of being a woman in a very male-dominated business?
Well, as a woman as a woman producer, see, I never consider myself a woman producer. I'm just a producer. I think that for both women and men, it's difficult to get into this industry, and there's other reasons why women don't gravitate into production. I think it has more to do with the time suck that it takes on your life, because really it's when you're starting, it's going to be 14 to 16-hour days, and even now, 30 years into it, I have those days. So it leaves very little time for social life and for those other things that are important to us women. So, throughout the time that I've been a producer and engineer, I have not experienced a lot of pushback for being a woman. I don't think so at all. In fact, my heroes when I was growing up were Susan Rogers and Maureen Droney and Leslie Ann Jones, and these were women that were engineering and producing, and so it just seemed like a really great thing to do with your life. And I agree. I've passed up some other parts of my life in order to do this career, but I'm super happy with it.
And what keeps you excited about making records?
One of the things I love about recording music is the new group of people that I get to meet every time we start a project, because all these characters are almost like little cartoon characters, that I get to learn their eccentricities and love their eccentricities and get to help them with their music. There's a lot of young musicians that I work with, and I can help guide them into what's important in the studio that they should be paying attention to. And I love that part of production.
What haven't you done that you'd like to?
Geez. I'm not sure that there's much that I haven't done, except for, well, I would like to do some recording in the space station. It hasn't been done yet. That's one thing that I haven't done yet in the space station, but I will have to go through astronaut training for that.
And is that on the agenda?
Yes, it is.
Really?
Well, you never know.
I mean that's yeah. We can't. There's no follow-up question to Sylvia Massy, astronaut.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for chatting.
You bet, Geoff.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at tapeop.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time.